Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Over the past week or two, we've been receiving plenty of comments asking to go over some of Yang's policies, so today we decided to make a video going over what Yang calls his big three policies. We will cover what they are, how they work, and what effects they will have on the American people. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. Human-centered capitalism. What capitalism prioritizes, the world does more of. So how can we change capitalism so that it focuses on what humans really want and need? Think of the following examples. Parenting or caring for loved ones, teaching or nurturing children, creating art, music, dance, working in struggling regions near our hometowns, preserving the environment, reading or writing for pleasure or personal growth, preventative healthcare, character building for young kids, your team, yourself, building community connections, having a hobby. Most of us do some or many of these things, and usually we don't do them for money. What these activities add up to is what we might call a normal life, a well-rounded life of care and character, rich with community and creativity and balance. When you do these things, you don't think of yourself as participating in capitalism, but the fact is, capitalism moves and energizes the modern world, and what capitalism values, our world does more of. What it doesn't, we do less of. Many of us feel like the activities of a normal life are becoming harder and harder to accomplish. So the question becomes, in a system where capitalism is a prime determinant of value, how can we preserve what we truly value as humans? What matters to us beyond money? In the US and in much of the developed world, our current form of capitalism is failing to produce an increasing standard of living for most of its citizens. It's time for an upgrade. Adam Smith, the Scottish economist who wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, is often regarded as the father of modern capitalism. His ideas that the invisible hand guides the market, that a division of labor exists and should exist, and that self-interest and competition lead to wealth creation, are so deeply internalized that most of us take them for granted. Today, many people contrast capitalism with socialism, the social ownership or democratic control of industries. The perception is that capitalism, as embodied by the West and the United States in particular, won the war of ideas by generating immense growth and wealth and elevating the standard of living of billions of people. By contrast, socialism, represented by the Soviet Union, which collapsed in 1991, and China, which moderated its approach in the 1980s, didn't work in practice and was thoroughly discredited. This assessment of capitalism triumphing over socialism misses a couple of important points. First, there is no such thing as a pure capitalist system. There have been many different forms of capitalist economies ever since money was invented around 5,000 years ago. The current form of institutional capitalism and corporatism is just the latest of many different versions. Similarly, there are many forms of capitalism in service around the world right now. For example, Singapore is the fourth richest country in the world in terms of per capita GDP. It's had an unemployment rate of 2.2% or lower since 2009 and is regarded as one of the most free and open pro-business economies in the world. Yet, the government in Singapore routinely shapes investment policy, and government-linked firms dominate telecommunications, finance, and media in ways that would be unthinkable in America, Norway, Japan, or Canada. Like Singapore, many countries' form of capitalism is steered not by an unseen hand, but by clear government policy. Imagine a new type of capitalist economy that's geared toward maximizing human well-being and fulfillment. These goals and GDP would sometimes go hand in hand, but there would be times when they wouldn't be aligned. For example, an airline removing passengers who had already boarded a plane in order to maximize its profitability would be good for capital but bad for people. The same goes for a drug company charging extortionate rates for a life-saving drug. Most Americans would agree that the airline should accept the lost revenue and the drug company accept a moderate profit margin. But what if this idea was repeated over and over again throughout the economy? Let's call it human-centered capitalism, or human capitalism for short. Human capitalism would have a few core tenets. Number 1, humanity is more important than money. Number 2, the unit of an economy is each person, not each dollar. Number 3, markets exist to serve our common goals and values. In business, there's a saying that what gets measured gets managed for. So we need to start measuring different things. The concepts of GDP and economic progress didn't exist until the Great Depression. However, when economist Simon Kuznets introduced it to Congress in 1934, he cautioned, "The welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measurement of national income as defined above." It's almost like he saw income inequality and bad jobs coming. Our economic system must shift to focus on bettering the lot of the average person. Instead of having our humanity subverted to serve the marketplace, capitalism has to be made to serve human ends and goals. In addition to GDP and job statistics, the government could adopt measurements like average physical fitness and mental health, quality of infrastructure, proportion of the elderly in quality care, marriage rates and successes, deaths of despair such as substance abuse, global temperature variance and sea levels, reacclimation of incarcerated individuals and rates of criminality, artistic and cultural vibrancy, dynamism and mobility, social and economic equity, civic engagement, cybersecurity, responsiveness, and evolution of government. This could be tied into a digital social credit system in which people who help move society in a particular direction might be rewarded. For example, a journalist who uncovered a source of waste, or an artist who beautified a city, or a hacker who strengthened our power grid could be rewarded with social credits. So could someone who helped another person recover from addiction or help acclimate an ex-convict into the workforce. Even someone who maintained a high level of physical fitness and helped others to do the same could be rewarded and recognized. Maybe you smile in disbelief at the concept of social credits, but it's based on a system currently in use in about 200 communities around the United States: time banking. In time banking, people trade time and build credits within their communities by performing various helpful tasks: transporting an item, walking a dog, cleaning up a yard, cooking a meal, providing a ride to the doctor, etc. The idea was championed in the US by Edgar Kahn, a law professor and anti-poverty activist in the mid-1990s, as a way to strengthen communities. Despite the success of time banks in some communities, they haven't caught hold that widely in the US, in part because they require a certain level of administration and resources to operate. But imagine a supercharged version of time banking backed by the federal government, where in addition to providing social value, there's real monetary value underlying it. The government could put significant amounts of DSCs as prizes and incentives for major initiatives. For example, they could allocate 100 million DSCs to reduce obesity levels in Mississippi, or 1 billion DSCs to improve high school graduation rates in Illinois, and then let people take various actions to collect it. Companies could help meet goals and create and sponsor campaigns around various causes. Nonprofits and NGOs would generate DSCs based on how much good they do and then distribute it back to volunteers and employees. New organizations and initiatives could be crowdfunded by DSCs instead of money, as people vote by sending in points. New organizations and initiatives could be crowdfunded by DSCs instead of money, as people vote by sending points in. We could create an entirely new parallel economy around social good. The power of this new marketplace and currency can't be overstated. Most of the entrepreneurs, technologists, and young people I know are champing at the bit to work on our problems. we can harness the country's ingenuity and energy to improve millions of lives if we could just create a way to monetize and measure these goals. But I've concluded there's no other way to make these changes than to have the federal government reorganize the economy. Even the richest and most ambitious philanthropists and companies either operate at the wrong scale or have multiple stakeholders that make big, long-term commitments difficult to sustain. We're staring at trillion-dollar problems and we need commensurate solutions. We're in a slow-moving crisis that is about to speed up. Medicare for all. Andrew Yang's healthcare plan breaks with both the Medicare for All bill endorsed by his progressive rivals and a public option favored by more moderate candidates. Yang proposes 6 reforms to the current system he calls a more productive approach to lowering healthcare costs for people who are struggling, billing his plan as a new way forward for healthcare in America. Healthcare has not been one of Yang's signature issues. The businessman turned candidate has focused largely on the threat of automation and the promise of a universal basic income, and like other Democrats in the race, his position on health policy has shifted. The outsider candidate originally voiced support for Medicare for All and ran ads in favor of it before removing a pledge from his website to work with Congress to create a Medicare for All system, and arguing that people should be able to keep their private insurance if they choose. I support the spirit of Medicare for All, Yang said in rolling out his new plan on December 16th, adding that he feels eliminating private insurance for millions of Americans is not a realistic strategy. Instead, Yang is calling for a set of policies to bring down pharmaceutical drug costs, use technology to help rural and low-income people access care, beef up mental health, dental, vision, and reproductive health benefits, and keep lobbyists and executives out of policymaking. What would the plan do? Yang lays out 6 steps he maintains will address the underlying problems of our current system. His proposal to lower soaring drug costs would empower the government to directly negotiate pharmaceutical prices. The plan does not specify whether this would apply only to Medicare and other public plans, or whether it would include the private market as well. Those negotiations would be shaped by international reference pricing, an idea supported by some Democrats and earlier this year by President Donald Trump, that would peg the amount the US pays for drugs to what other developed nations pay. Should those negotiations fail to bring down costs, Yang would direct the government to manufacture drugs itself to create more competition or import cheaper drugs from overseas. Yang also proposes making telehealth services more widely available, licensing doctors to practice across state lines, and creating a rural broadband internet network to reach underserved communities. He proposes paying physicians by salary instead of by a fee-for-service basis, doing more to shield providers from malpractice lawsuits, and incentivizing doctors to work in rural areas by forgiving student loans. He also says he would shift the focus of the health system to preventative care, boost coverage of mental health care, vision, dental, reproductive and maternal health, veterans health, and care for people with disabilities, and curtail the influence of lobbyists. Yang's plan is a combination of executive and regulatory actions he could take as president, pledges to work with Congress on passing legislation, and promises to pressure the healthcare industry to make reforms. These tactics in combination, he argues, would reduce high healthcare costs more swiftly and effectively than a full-scale overhaul like Medicare for All. His plan doesn't have a cost estimate. Who would it help? Yang's plan puts a strong focus on mental health, care for veterans, people with disabilities, reproductive health, and HIV and AIDS detection and treatment. The plan would also help those with chronic conditions like diabetes or cancer who struggle to afford their medication, and people in rural areas who would benefit from the telehealth and doctor incentive proposals. The Freedom Dividend. Andrew Yang says the next president needs to do almost the opposite of Donald Trump, and the opposite of Donald Trump is an Asian man who likes math. Yang, a 44-year-old entrepreneur running for the Democratic nomination, also has a big idea that has become the central element of his campaign, giving every American $1,000 a month. If you've heard anything about me and my campaign, you've heard that someone is running for president who wants to give every American $1,000 a month, Yang said at the second presidential debate in Detroit. I know this may sound like a gimmick, but this is a deeply American idea from Thomas Paine to Martin Luther King to today. What are the details of Yang's proposals, and what are the benefits and drawbacks? We checked in with the economists and others who have looked into ideas like Yang's. What does Yang propose? The Freedom Dividend, as Yang calls it, is a variation of an idea that's been around for decades, generally known as universal basic income. Yang's website includes favorable quotes about the idea from everyone from Martin Luther King Jr. to Richard Nixon, who weighed a similar proposal while president, as well as modern-day tech entrepreneurs like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. Under Yang's proposal, every American over 18 would receive a payment from the government for $1,000 a month or $12,000 a year. Yang says the payments would be offset by a 10% value-added tax, VAT, and by replacing duplicative social welfare spending. Current recipients could choose between their existing benefits and $1,000 in cash. What are the proposed benefits of Yang's policy? Universal basic income has gained traction on both sides of the ideological spectrum. On the left, supporters see the proposal as a way to reduce extreme poverty and remove the stigma from taking government support. On the right, some see it as a way to minimize welfare dependency and curb the reach of government. Here are some of the benefits according to the Yang campaign. It can increase bargaining power for workers because a guaranteed unconditional income gives them leverage to say no to exploitative wages and abusive working conditions. It can encourage entrepreneurial business efforts because it provides for basic needs in the early lean days of a company and acts as a safety net if the business fails. It can reduce stress by easing concerns about financial insecurity. It can allow people to work fewer hours in order to volunteer in the community, attend to ailing relatives, help raise children, or simply pursue hobbies that make them feel happier. It can reduce administrative costs for the government by shifting from traditional means-tested social welfare programs to a one-size-fits-all payment. So that wraps up the video for today. I hope this video helped those that were unsure on exactly what Yang's main policies are. And if you guys would like to see another video going over Andrew Yang's other policies, let us know in the comments. But with that being said, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this, and check out the videos on the screen to see more content like this. Thanks for watching and have a nice day, folks.